Okay, welcome back. Now we are going to actually annotate the sources. Alright, now this is always what we call the big picture or the big question. And if you look at the big picture or the big question, it's always asking you how to look at the sources when you're annotating. Okay, so if you remember Korean War, who was responsible for the Korean War? There's a lot of people involved or a lot of countries involved. There was USA, South Korea, United Nations. There is also, on the other hand, Soviet Union, as well as North Korea. Okay, now let's read the background information. After World War II, Korea was divided, the North under the leader Kim Il-sung. So always remember that this guy here is North Korean leader. Was communist. The South under the leader Syngman Rhee, backed by USA. So this guy here is the South Korean leader. Korean War started on this year. Okay, started and it ended in 1953. Alright, the United Nations, again, if you recall, United Nations, okay, international organization. Alright, and the United States provided the majority of these forces to United Nations. Okay, always look at the bigger question, who was responsible for the Korean War? Now look at source A. Source A is an extract from an American magazine. Alright, so you don't know, could be biased, maybe not. Alright, and the year, however, is interesting. It is what we call a recent source, which means it is after the war. And if you look very carefully at source A, okay, read it first. Now, this line is interesting because it says here, Kim Il-sung wanted such a war. He always insisted and proclaimed that war was the only way to unify Korea. So for this, if you go back to the big question, who was responsible for the Korean War? This was actually North Korea. North Korea, communist. Okay? And I like this line. Look at this line. The last line is very important here, this part. Even though Stalin always regarded Kim as a puppet, that means what? I can manipulate, right? It was often the Korean leader who always controlled the Soviet leader. Very interesting, this part. Okay? Because we always thought that it was Stalin who controlled North Korea or Kim Il-sung. But you can see from this particular source, it is the opposite. But do we know whether this could be a biased source? Possible, because look, again, this is from an American magazine. Okay? Alright? Now, moving on. We've done this before, and if you look very carefully, this is actually a source made by United Nations. Now, this is December 1952. And if you look at the question, why do you think this source was published at this time? So this time here actually meant, why was it published in 1952? 1952, if you remember, Korean War started 1950 all the way to 1953. So 1952 means that it is in the middle of the war. Okay? Now the Korean War or the Korean words, red Korean ox, Chinese servant, Russian master. So this is obviously the master. This is obviously the servant. And this is the ox. Now, an ox is someone who works the most. So based on just this source, who do you think is responsible for the Korean War? Obviously the master, right? So the master, who's the master here? The master here is Soviet Union. So it is always Soviet Union, based on this source, that actually caused the Korean War. Okay? However, we always take note, this is a poster by United Nations. Could it be biased? Is there a motive behind this source? Right? Okay, moving on. Let's look at source C. Now, an extract from a Russian leader. We do not know who this Russian leader is. Autobiography. And what is an autobiography? Now, an autobiography is an account of a person's life written by that person. Now, again, it is published after Korean War. Okay? Now, although the Soviets knew about the attack beforehand, the primary responsibility for the war rested with the North Koreans. So this particular Russian leader is again blaming the North Koreans. Now let's take a look. The Korean War was a civil war. Now what is the meaning of a civil war? A civil war is literally war within the country. Okay? The original idea was proposed by Kim Il-sung and the North Koreans, who drew up the plan for the invasion. Stalin initially hesitated to approve it. That means Stalin didn't want a war and only gave the go-ahead. Go-ahead means agree. Okay? After consulting with Mao Zedong. Who is Mao Zedong? China leader. And the China leader is communist. Therefore, he constantly sought to limit Soviet involvement in the conflict. I must stress that the war was not Stalin's idea. So whose idea if it's not Stalin's idea? It was the idea of the North Koreans. So for this source, who can we blame? We can blame again North Korea. Okay? Now moving on to source D, an extract from The Roots of European Security by Soviet historian, published again in 1984. Soviet historian again, let's ask ourselves, could this be a biased source? We don't know, we haven't read. 1984, again, it is after Korean War. Now let's look at the source. The US having landed troops in the southern Korea after Japan surrendered, was seeking to gain control of the whole country. And the whole country here is, we're talking about Korea. By unleashing a civil war in June 1950, the South Koreans, backed by the United States, turned the Korean Peninsula into an arena of fierce international conflict. So from here, we can already get sensing that this Soviet historian was actually blaming the United States. Okay? And could this particular Soviet historian be biased? Or maybe, if we really look very carefully, turn another color, maybe the truth. Why is it the truth? Because this is 1984. Maybe the historian managed to get more information. Maybe, after all these events, there is new data or new information being posted online that, for all you know, this could be the truth. So this is a very interesting source. Okay, I'm going to put an X here. But coming back, okay, is this particular source, or who is actually responsible for this Korean War based on this source? I would say, everyone, who is USA. Okay? Alright, this is very familiar. We've done this. Okay? Again, this is a Chinese poster. Look at the year 1950, which means what? It is in the middle of the war. It could be, in the start actually of the war. And if you look very carefully, Chinese poster. Who was China supporting? China was supporting both North Korea as well as Soviet Union. So is this source biased? You can decide on your own. And if you look very carefully, remember we went through this. Alright, General MacArthur here, who does he represent? He represents USA. And if you look very carefully, the bombs, they are dropping. Where is the bombs dropping? Actually, the bombs is dropping in the Chinese area, or China. And who is this USA or General MacArthur killing? He's killing the Koreans. So obviously, based on this source, who can I blame? I will blame USA. Okay, so coming back to this, okay, so who was responsible for the Korean War? Okay, so let's recap. Source A. Okay, who was responsible for the Korean War? Let's look at source A. We said that it was North Korea was responsible for the Korean War. Okay, so it was North Korea. Source B. Who was responsible for the Korean War? Let's take a look. Source B. Source B, obviously, it was Soviet Union was responsible for the Korean War. Source C. Who was responsible for the Korean War in source C? North Korea was responsible for the Korean War in source C. Source D, very obvious. Remember this part? Source D, who was responsible for the Korean War? It was USA who was responsible for the Korean War. And lastly, source E, which is the most obvious source. Source E, who was responsible for the Korean War? It was USA. Okay, so I really hope that this kind of way where you actually list the sources, alright, so you're able to actually see and you're able to annotate. Now, of course, in the real N level, when you annotate everything like this, it is going to take time. Okay, this is for revision. So you must make sure that when you annotate, you look at certain requirements. Alright, so what are the requirements when you annotate? Take note. Okay, when you annotate sources, you must make sure you look at the year. You must make sure you look at the creator. You also look at the audience. Okay, you must also look from your knowledge. If it was a Russian source, obviously the Russian source would actually be supporting Soviet Union or supporting North Korea. So take note, you need to know. And if it was a USA or a United Nations source, obviously they would be supporting South Korea. So you need to make sure you know all this, your knowledge of Korean War. And lastly, you ask yourself, is there biasness? How much can I trust this source? Okay, so take note of all this when you're annotating. Okay, all right. Thank you very much, everyone. I'm going to stop this recording.